Right foot creep, walking with that heater. Look around.
Stop.
Right
Damn,
foot
boy.
creep, walking with that heater.
Boy.
Don't put that clip in there. It's gonna look like I actually abused you.
Yeah, I'm putting that in there. I'm sending this to police.
I'm sending that to the police.
Did you at least win your game?
Unfortunately, we lost in penalties.
Bro, you're
trying to
telling
tell
me
me
you
you
went
were
an
30
hour?
minutes late.
You went an hour overtime and lost the game? You're the biggest L ever.
Yo, it's not my fault. We lost in penalties, bro. Like, yo,
Play the game right.
The keeper.
I already told
like,
you, if you would have scored more points,
I
y'all would have
did.
won.
I did all I could.
Anyways, what's
All
up,
right.
guys?
Welcome back to another episode of the Bible Unscripted. This is episode 6, even though Soul tried to argue with me all last episode and say that was episode 6. This is episode 6, and we are going to be jumping into chapter 11 of the book of Genesis. So who's here with me?
I already know who it is. It's your favorite light.
That's Soul. That's
Yes.
Soul. Who's this?
I'm Cameron.
All right.
Anyways.
Oh, praise the Lord. All right, so I am going to read just a couple verses out of chapter 11. This is called the Tower of Babel. Now, what are you doing?
The same thing we do every
Oh
time.
my
This video,
goodness.
He like looks intimately at them. And I
Oh
look
my
and disgust
goodness.
At him and then
Yes, there's so many people that are probably so uncomfortable watching these videos because of you. All right, chapter 11. I'm going to read verses
Christy.
1 through 9. Just disregard whatever is going on with him. So, we're going to talk about the whole chapter, but I wanted to read that because that's kind of the main chunk of the chapter, the main story out of the chapter. So, here we go. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used bricks instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches into the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So let's talk about first the first 9 verses, and then we'll discuss in the later half, the last kind of chunk there, talking about the genealogy and that kind of stuff. So what do y'all have to say about the Tower of Babel?
So, like, do you think, like, it would have been better than the Eiffel Tower? Or, like, the World Trade Center? Or, like, the Tower of Giza or Pisa or Leaning Tower?
Okay, so let's be realistic here. They're using mud bricks. So a tower to them in this current time and era, we can statistically say that it would have been no taller than.
But they did build, well, not them, but somebody built the pyramids.
Right.
It was
Those
me.
were big.
Right. But we're saying it couldn't have been any bigger than a Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, probably not.
It's-
probably not the size of
That's
the
what
World
I'm saying.
Trade
It's made of
Centers.
mud bricks.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it wasn't big. It just wasn't that big.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah, and so just so we can talk about the first little section there, because it talks about how they were one language and one type of speech. So we do have to remember that everybody originated from who?
Or
Adam and Eve,
yeah.
and then ultimately from Noah and his family after the flood. Now, at this point, they had one language because it was all the same people. They all came from the same group, and they all kind of lived together during this time, especially when you go to Noah. Like, they were all kind of isolated in this one area, and they're coming from the family of Noah. And it also says that they had the same speech, meaning, like, you know how for us, like, even in the United States, we, as in North Carolina, have a little bit of a southern accent. If you go up north to, like, New Jersey or something, they have a different kind of way that they speak. If you go out west to, like, California, they've got a different way that they speak. So this is saying that everybody had the same exact language, the same exact way of speaking. Now, I looked in a couple commentaries. This doesn't mean everybody looked the same, meaning like this doesn't mean this was like some, like one race, one kind type thing, right? Like there could have been different skin colors, hair colors, eye colors, different facial features, that kind of thing. But it was one speech because they had all come from kind of this one group. But it might have just been one race, but we don't know. It just tells us that they have one speech that they spoke. And ultimately they come together and they say what? Like, we don't want to kind of break apart. We want to keep our group together.
They were tighter than the Backstreet Boys.
Bro, for real. Yeah.
Like, that's a real commitment.
You for real, yeah.
God broke up the Backstreet Boys.
Yo, no way.
No, but so God had commanded first Adam and Eve, and then he commanded Noah and his family to do what? To go forth, reproduce, multiply, and spread over the face of the earth. Like, that was a command. You need to do this. And they were like, we don't want to do that. Like, we're this tight family group, whatever. We want to stick like this. So they're like, I don't know what their thinking is here. Like, I don't know why building a tower would not make them spread apart. But that was their thought process. They're like, we're going to build this big tower, and everybody's going to know who we are and know what this is, and we're all going to stick right here together, right? So that was kind of their plan. I don't know what the thinking was behind that, but that was their plan here. And we don't know exactly what it was that they were building. You know, I looked up a couple different things that said the tower was like a military type thing.
What in the world?
It said, another one said that it could have been like an idea of escaping a second flood. Like they had this thing that they could try to climb up into to escape the flood. I personally think that it was more of kind of like an idol. Like they just built this big idol thing that they not necessarily worshipped as in like bowing down to it, but worshipped themselves through it. Like this, like, we did this. Like, look at what we did, guys. We built this big, whatever in the world this thing was, tower out here. And it was more focused on themselves because they didn't want to be broken apart. And so they make these bricks and they plan to build this tower to the heavens. Again, heavens, different. Heaven, where God lives. Heavens typically is referring to the sky or beyond the sky, like outer space. So this isn't, a lot of people think that they were literally trying to like build a bridge to God and they were going to like dethrone God. That was not their thinking. They are saying the heavens, we're going to build a tower into the sky. Not trying to go and like fight God, but they're trying to get as high as they can up into the sky. Again, for whatever reason, we're not exactly sure. Ultimately, it was to make a name for themselves. And so they had set out to do that. And the people are focused on making this name. They're very prideful. And God comes down and he realizes, he's like, ooh, this isn't too good. Right? Now, again, this is where people get confused and they think that God was fearful of these people. Like, oh man, they're getting real close to heaven. Like they're about to bust through the pearly gates. Yeah. No, that's it. It is God saw the prideful heart of his people and he realized they're about to really mess themselves up. Ultimately, because I think if this would have gone unchecked, is they would have started to view themselves in God's seat. Meaning, they would have been like, we don't need God. Look what we did. Look at this tower. Look at this city. Like, we don't need a God. We are the gods, right? And so God saw like this prideful hearts building up, and that's where he's like, this is not good. So he brings the Trinity together. That's where we see that us. God says, let us go down. That's talking about the Trinity, the Godhead, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. They come down and they confuse the language. So they just make everybody speak different things. We don't know exactly what the original first language was. Who knows? But I imagine that was a real crazy scenario. Like you've spoke one language your whole life. Next thing you know, you're speaking a language you've never even heard of before. The people freak out, and then he scatters them among the face of the earth. So let's talk about this story a little bit. The first thing I want to point out is I want you to imagine, right? Like now, obviously, English was not the first language, but for us, we've spoke English our whole life, unless y'all are like hiding, you were Russian spies, and I didn't know about it. Right? So we spoke English. You're what, 18?
Yeah.
18. I'm 26. So imagine at 18, 26 years old, just out of nowhere, you're speaking like Mandarin, you're speaking, I don't even know, you're speaking Chinese, and I'm speaking Hungarian, right? Like,
Yeah, somebody cancel Sean.
right? Well, no, they're different dialects though. But right? But so like, imagine that you've never even heard of that language,
am I
and just
saying?
next thing you know, you're just like, and you're like, what is happening? Like, I imagine that was the most chaotic moment ever. Just think about this big group of people. They're all working together. They're building this tower. Next thing you know, it's just like, boom. They're all like,
And they're like, gone.
yeah, like absolute chaos.
Now I do wonder, like, what was the splitting apart like?
Right.
Because I was thinking like maybe it was like,
Pangea.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, maybe it was Pangea, and then that's when the continental drift happened, which would make sense. But then, like, it could have been like there could have been, already the continents, and then they were like all in one place, maybe. Because
That's the Pangea.
No,
Look,
no.
I'm
saying
not a
the people-
They were
conspiracy
like all in
person,
one continent.
Yeah.
That's
but
what he's saying.
it is hard to deny that they don't look like they go together. Like
No.
the
I
continents
100%
look
agree.
like
I
they
think
stick
that
together.
this
They're like
is
puzzle
when-
pieces.
Either
Yeah.
the fall at the beginning, and maybe the garden was like the centerpiece of Pangea, maybe, and it was
And all
split from there.
split.
Yeah.
Or
This
like you're
was the
saying,
split.
this was the split. He split the lands apart because, like,
And then he just
can't-
teleported the people. Like, how did that work? He was just like,
that's another. Thing.
some people just some
just
people
gone.
exactly. Some people just spawned on a mountain like it was freaking Minecraft or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
That'd be real wild. Like You're
like,
here.
used to this weather. Think about
boom,
it.
you're
That
just
is
somewhere else.
Not even a plane or a car. You're just in a different
Boom.
weather. Like, imagine it being 70 degrees here. You teleport, now it's 30 degrees. The shock. You can't. You're speaking a whole other language, But that's another thing. I feel like we don't appreciate how nice we had it when we spoke the same language. Could you imagine how much easier it would be to spread the gospel in these villages and rural areas to where we don't speak the same languages and we need translators? We have to convince the translator that what we're doing, we're trying to help them. It would speed the process up so fast if we just all understood each other.
And the binding glue that could save all of this is Duolingo. This is not a sponsored video, but guys, go get your Duolingo subscriptions, man. I went from a brokey, not being able to speak English very well,
To a brokey who can
speak English pretty well. And my wife came back, my kids, they love me now.
disclaimer, he's not married, nor does he have kids.
Duolingo changed my life, and they'll change yours too.
So
Oh my goodness.
my bad.
Oh goodness. Yes. So
so forgot the schizophrenia medicine.
No way, man.
So yes, everybody's together speaking one language, and I think the scripture shows like the ease of communication makes things so much easier. Like they're throwing a city together and building this tower because they're all able to relate and communicate together, and the next thing God's like boom, like
Take that.
everything changes in an instant.
For me, what I like to think of is when you're doing Lego wars with somebody, who can build the biggest or the coolest city or
Last
house.
time
or
you played with
whatever.
Legos?
I don't know, and I was like,
Yesterday afternoon.
no way. I wasn't even in state yesterday afternoon, but I just imagine it's you're competing to see. Or gingerbread houses, making the best gingerbread house, and somebody's doing a little too good. So you
Kind of like we do, at the Christmas party.
just take that whole thing down, man. Get out of here, man. You're doing too good. Hey, what are you doing with my Kleenex box?
No.
Also, I love the irony that God uses, right? Like the whole reason the people build this tower, the whole reason they build this city is because they're like, we don't want this one thing to happen. We don't want to be scattered. And then, like, what's the one thing God does? No! He separates all of them. But it's also, it's for protection, right? Like, it wasn't just a punishment, but God did it for protection. Like he saw, again, when he looked down and he saw them building this city and this tower, it wasn't he was afraid of them. He was afraid of their hearts. Like he saw that they were running from him and they were trying to lead their own lives. And so it's just so ironic that like God takes the one thing they didn't want, uses it for their good, even though they're not going to see that in that moment because of the chaos that unbreaks. But like he uses it for their good, and I just think that's so funny. We see that a lot though in God is like the one thing. Like I think about Jonah, right? Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh, and like the one thing God was going to make Jonah do was go to Nineveh. And so it's just like the punishments that God used are for protection, but they're a lot of times the things that we don't want to happen, but God uses them for our good. So the remainder of the chapter, I'm not going to read it, is we get into the genealogy from Shem to Abram. Now, Abram is Abraham, or later on becomes Abraham. That's a big character in the Bible. I'll talk about it a little bit later. And then we have the introduction of Abram's family. Now, I do want to kind of just throw in there, it's important, or genealogies are important. It is super easy to skip over genealogies because they're boring, because it's literally like, it was this person, and they lived this many years, and then they had this son, and then they lived another number of years, and then that son had lived this many years, and they had a son, and it just keeps on going. It's like, oh my goodness, this is so boring. And I get that. But genealogies are really, really important because ultimately God, who wrote the Bible, like he's the author of the Bible, written by man, but authored by God, right, is he has a reason that he put it in there. And so for this, we're at Shem, who is a son of Noah, that goes to Abram, or Abraham, which comes Jesus, right? Like Jesus comes from this lineage. And so we're seeing this kind of, this, funnel to the person of Jesus. And that's why those lineages are important to see where they plug in. And then also we get to this person of Abram, who again later becomes Abraham, who I did looked up some statistics. So Abram, or Abraham, is mentioned over 300 times in the Old Testament. He's by far the most mentioned character in the Old Testament of the Bible. Again, because through him comes Jesus. Like, we have the promise, which we'll get into later on, is the promise of Abraham, the covenant of Abraham, where God says, I'm going to bless the world through you, Abraham, which ultimately he was talking about, I'm bringing Jesus through your family. But so over 300 times, then you have over 2,000 years are covered from creation to the New Testament, where the New Testament opens up. Roughly 2,000 years, 1/3 of the Old Testament. Of that you've got 2,000 years that are covered in the Old Testament, but 1/3 of the book is solely focused about Abraham and his family. So like this dude is important. So this genealogy is important because you go from Shem to Abram, and then we get the introduction of Abram and his family. So don't skip over the genealogies. I know that they can be boring, but figure out, why did God put this genealogy in here? Who are these people and why are they important? Who do they connect to? Necessarily not right here, but who do they connect to in the New Testament? Because a lot of times it's going to be Jesus, or it's going to be somebody in connection to Jesus. So don't skip over the genealogies. And so that's kind of the end of chapter 11 there. So if y'all don't have anything, let's talk about application of chapter 11. What do we take away from this weird story of a bunch of people wanting to build a tower up into the sky, and then God smushes that dream and then makes them speak different languages and cast them all over the world? Like, what do we take from that?
I think the Tower of Babel is a great story that we can apply to our lives, mainly for the fact that I think a lot of people try and build their own towers in their lives. Whether that's, like we were talking about in the last episode, whether that's like an educational basis, physical basis, financial basis, social basis, whatever. We try and build our own towers with our own foundations. And, having big goals and big dreams. I'm not saying that that's bad, and I'm not saying that building your portfolio and your credentials is bad. I'm not saying that. However, when we make the foundation ourselves and not God, then that's going to fall apart. Or better yet, God's going to take it down, because he's supposed to be the cornerstone, the rock, the foundation of what you do. And if that he's not doing that, you cannot be surprised that it fell apart, and you can't blame God for having that fall apart. Many people, like I said, build their own towers and trying to find their own identities through the things that they do. However, it's our identity through God and through Christ that is supposed to be more prevalent and relevant to who we are. And if that's not the case for you, then it's going to be a matter of time before everything falls down. You can't expect longevity if your foundation is poor to begin with. I think that's a big thing that we have to keep in mind,
Yeah, and I have an application point that's really close to that. There is no such thing as self-made, right? I hate that phrase.
Self-made.
I'm self-made. Like bodybuilders use it. These big business guru people use it. I'm self-made. Bull crap. Nobody is self-made. No. Everything funnels back to God. Look, I understand not everybody believes in God. I understand not everybody has the same views as God. But everything funnels back to something bigger than yourself. Mm-hmm. Yes. Did you come from the ground up? Yeah, you might have. Did you work hard? Yeah, you might have. Did you put the grind in? Yeah, you might have. But still, everything funnels back to something bigger than you. Think about like a bodybuilder. I'm self-made. No, you're not. Okay? You had to eat food to get big, right? Okay? Did you grow that food? No, there was somebody who grew that food. Did that person provide everything that was needed to grow that food? No, there was something beyond them. Who provided, the soil? Who provided the water? Who provided the sunlight? Boom. It goes back to something bigger than yourself. You're not self-made. You talk about business people. They're like, oh, I'm self-made. I used to live on the streets, blah, 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 blah. But now I own this Fortune 500 company. I've got millions and billions of dollars. I'm self-made. No, you're not. It all funnels back. Okay, you had to be smart to get to that position. Okay, well, let's funnel it back. Well, where did you come from? Well, you came from your parents, so you can't take ownership of that. Where did they come from? And it funnels back, and where does it end up? God. Nobody is self-made. No, you do not have that claim. And that's what they're trying to do in chapter 11 is they're like, we want to be self-made. We made a name for ourselves building this tower. No, you didn't. Where did the mud and the brick come from? Where did the sun come from? You're baking it in. Like, it still funnels back to God. Like, nobody is doing it on their own. I understand you work hard and you achieve your goals and you set yourself up to do these things, and that's amazing. But if you try to say, I did this, let me tell you, God's going to crush you. Because we need to give God the glory for everything that we do. There's nobody that's self-made, independent. It's a bunch of crap. No, everything funnels back to God.
I mean, even then, just to dull it down, the fact that we are blessed enough to use our hands to pick up a dumbbell.
Yes.
The fact that there are people that can't do that. There are people that physically cannot build their bodies. There are people that don't have hands to open up their Bible. How blessed are we to be able to sit here and open a Bible, sit here at this table and just talk?
Absolutely.
There is, like you said, no one self-made.
I think that goes, humility is a very, very huge topic in the Bible, and the more you read the scriptures, the more you'll find the topic of humility being brought up in the Bible, and how important it is, how significant it is, and how often you'll find yourself needing humility in a situation, even if we don't want to be humble, like what Sean was just saying, talking about I built my own body, I built my own business, I built my own education, I built my own friends, social, whatever. I built my life. It calls for humility because there's always an outside force that is there for you to leech off of. There's always an outside force for that, it all leads back to God. And I think that just gave me the greatest argument in existence when people are like, oh, whoa, does God exist? But that's a different topic. But humility is something that you will see in your life. If you just take a step back and look at who you are, where you've come from, where you are now, and all the outside forces that had to have been placed there in order for it to happen. Because if one of those things were missing, then the whole thing could have changed. Whole situation could have changed. Whatever that may look like. Maybe that's your education. Maybe that's just your existence in general. Knowing that there's so many outside forces coming into play, it all traces back to one thing. And that is why humility is such a key component to being a spiritual person. Not even just a spiritual person, but just a good person in general. Although, Scripture does say there's no good person, but just being a person that wants to grow, humility is a must and is a key component, because there's always something bigger. It's never you at the center of your life. There's always something greater pouring into it. And I think that's another mic drop, man. Yo, I'm going crazy today. My days, man. These Instagram reels are gonna go crazy.
Y'all got anything else?
No. I think that was good.
This is the outro.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, y'all already know the deal, man. Make sure you boom on that like button, man. Every time you see a new video, make sure you like them, subscribe, share it to 3 of your friends, or else I'm gonna have to pull up to your crib. I'm gonna have to boom on your front door, and then I'm gonna boom in your head, and boom on your grandma, and boom on your little chihuahua at the house, man. Hey, y'all peace out.
All right, so that concludes. I don't think we can put that in there, but that concludes episode. I think we're on episode 5 of the Bible Unscripted. Is it 6? Episode whatever of the Bible Unscripted. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you're enjoying these podcasts. Please feel free to leave a comment just to encourage us, to let us know, what you want to hear. We're going to continue on into chapter 11 in our next episode. Again, if you're looking for a youth ministry to be a part of, you can come and join us here at Lebanon Student Ministries at Lebanon Baptist Church on High Cone Road. We would love to have you. We meet on Wednesday nights at 6:15 and Sunday morning at 10:45 a.m. We hope you have a blessed week, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Bible Unscripted.
Oh, y'all think I'm ending the video right now?
No, it's over.